What's up, everybody? This is the Tied to the Land podcast, where we believe that everybody is tied to the land in some way, shape, or form. On this podcast, we'll explore the intimate connection that people feel with the land beneath their feet, while telling the stories of folks whose lives have been impacted by their roots to the rural lifestyle. This podcast is brought to you by Arrowhead Land Company, where their mission is to create, inspire, or advance a connection to the land in every person throughout the world. What's up, guys? This is the Tied to the Land podcast. I'm Andrew Schultz, and we're here with David Thoming today. What's up, David?
Oh, happy to be here, Andrew.
All right, right on, man. We're happy to have you. So, David is a rural real estate specialist with Arrowhead Land Company as of not all that long ago.
February 7th.
So, he's been hard at it for almost 3 months now?
Yep.
Almost 3 months now. How are you liking it so far?
I love it.
Yeah, it's awesome, man.
So, every day's a great day.
We're going to get into some cool stuff here today. I think David's got an awesome story and, where he comes from, where he is now, some family roots and ties to the land, of course. And, because this is the Tied to the Land podcast, we want to hear about how you're tied to the land. And so I think you've got a cool story to tell, and that's what I want these folks to get the pleasure of hearing today. So we'll get into some other good stuff, but, man, before we get into, your real estate career and so on and so forth, you and I have had a chance to catch up, of course, get to know each other since you've come here. And you come from California originally, and your family comes from California, but some of your family was in Oklahoma before they were in California. And so I'm not going to spill all the details. I want to hear you tell us about it. Tell us about your family, how they got together, how you came about, and so on and so forth.
Sure. Thank you. Yeah, so my German side of the family, the Thoming side, originally came from Germany in 1863 and went to California and started dry land farming. And they left Germany because times were tough and wanted to get to America and have a great place and make it better for their family and their children and things like that. And so my family's been farming there. The original piece of ground that we got in a land grant, we're still farming that same piece of ground. And, very proud of that history and that legacy back in California. My mom's side of the family actually came from here in Oklahoma in Conemaugh, and they left during the Depression, during the Dust Bowl, when a lot of Okies, as they were called at the time, moved to California. They were picking cotton when they first got there. And I always like to remind my kids that, you think times are tough, try putting a baby on your back and picking cotton like my grandmother did. That's a whole different level of toughness there. One thing led to another at a high school dance, and, my mom met dad and, got married, and here I am. And, fast forward to today, and about 5 years ago, started kind of seeing the handwriting on the wall that agriculture in California was going to change radically, and it has, and not for the better. It's gotten really tough, especially for family farms, to survive with the amount of regulations, minimum wage increases, things like that, just make it untenable. Market prices being what they are, it's very difficult to make ends meet. And then in general in California, making it very tough for young people to make it in life. You've got a 3-bedroom, 2-bath home, and, older neighborhood, and you're going to pay $600,000, $700,000, $800,000 for that home. It's just crazy. So how does a young person ever make it? And I have, 3 children. My oldest now is 24. And, at the time he was, 19, 20, and I'm looking at him and, how does he ever live that American dream of owning a home or, even owning land or anything like that? And it just wasn't going to happen in California. So my wife and I started looking at, where can we move to that's more like it was when we were kids, growing up in the 70s and 80s in California. And we have some family in the panhandle of Texas, and we had visited there, and we drove out to Oklahoma. And first thing we were really shocked about was it didn't look anything like the Dust Bowl pictures we saw in our history books.
Yeah.
And there's trees here. It's crazy. And it really fell in love with it immediately. We love everything about Oklahoma, and geographically speaking, we ended up buying land from Will, and which was how I got introduced first to Will, which was great. It's solid trees, and we've got deer and turkey, and it's just a wonderful, wonderful place. But you could take all of that beauty away and all of the hunting opportunities and everything away. And if all that was left were the people of Oklahoma, I would move just for that.
Yeah.
They're amazing people.
Yeah, man. There's so many good people in this state. And I really feel like Oklahoma is one of the most underrated states. And I've said that a lot. I've probably said it on this podcast before. It really is a great place. And, not being from here originally myself either, when you think of Oklahoma, you think of, this crazy heat and, the red dirt, which of course is only in the western part of the state and some other parts as you move a little bit further to the central state. But I mean, it's not really what most people think it is. It is very diverse. It's very beautiful. There's mountains here. There's lots of trees, like you were saying. There's rivers and, wild game is abundant. There's cattle, but there's also row crop. I mean, it is just an awesome state. But going back to what you said, the people here are really great too. And you don't get that everywhere. And you especially probably didn't get that depending on where you were at in California.
Yeah.
But, California, you've told me a lot about this. Of course, a lot of people listening and even myself, I always had this perception of California for what you hear in the news. And a lot of it is that. But there's also a lot of good, down-to-earth country folk who are trying to make a living on, farming right now, and people who love the rural lifestyle just like we do. And I want you to tell us more about that because your family has farmed out there for several years. And I want you to get into that.
Yeah, only 160 years.
160 years. All right.
And yeah, California's got tons of opportunities for outdoor pursuits. Whether you go backpacking, hunting in the Sierra Nevada mountains, the waterfowl hunting in California is second to none, in the Delta region and up north in the rice fields and the duck hunting. It really was a wonderful, wonderful place to grow up. And you talked about the people in California and some places being better than others. It really used to be like that. There were, you'd go down to LA and you would expect to get what you get when you go to LA. But then we would kind of go back home into the valley and, the Central Valley was mostly farmers and it was a lot like what Oklahoma is now. Where, people are looking out for one another and willing to, help each other out. But unfortunately, it just grew so much that we just kind of got overrun and you couldn't get away from it anymore. I loved my home and the property I lived on, and I loved our farm and I loved our legacy there. But it just got to the point where it wasn't going to get any better. And I sat down with my dad and I explained to him what I was doing. And he said, well, how could you leave? We've got deep roots. And I said, yeah. And I said, and your great-grandfather had pretty deep roots in Germany, didn't he? And he left. And, I look back very fondly at my ancestors for making the decisions that they did, both sets, whether the ones that came from Oklahoma when they did and the ones that left Germany and went to California. And I hope that my descendants look back at me the same way and say, I'm sure glad he decided to move us to Oklahoma.
Yeah. And I venture to say that your family did not come here through an open southern border either, right?
They came through Ellis Island and Ellis Island and Angel Island. Actually, I got traced my Oklahoma roots all the way back to pre-Revolutionary days, Revolutionary War, which is pretty interesting to do their genealogy. And then the German side is quite interesting. That the trip they had to take. They go by sailboat and they go to Panama and then get on mules, cross over to the Pacific side, get on another ship and go to San Francisco and then go to Angel Island. The Angel Island was kind of like Ellis Island, but on the West Coast.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Cool. So did you ever get to hear stories from, I guess you said it would have been your wife's grandmother about their decision to leave Oklahoma, or I'm sorry, your mom's grandmother about their decision to leave Oklahoma and what that was like when they were just looking that in the face and saying like, man, this is a big move. And then, obviously things escalated from there. Tell us about, like, if you ever heard about that.
A little bit. So they were, very poor. They didn't own the land that they lived on. My grandfather and my grandmother had just gotten married. They were both 18. And he signed up for the Civilian Conservation Corps just to get a little bit of money and some food to eat. And it was just, it was the Great Depression was in full swing. It was before the war started, and they just were trying to find a place to go to where they could earn a living. You know, people back then, is one thing my grandfather really stressed was we weren't looking for a handout. We wanted to work. We just couldn't find anybody that was hiring to do anything, and it was very difficult, you know, to farm and share crop the way they were trying to do it. And so both sets of great grandparents made the decision, you know, hey, look, you know, let's load up the old car and start heading west. And two of them so one set of great grandparents stopped in Pampa. He got a job there, and they lived their days out in Pampa. Which, have you been to Pampa?
No, not been to Pampa.
Okay.
I don't even know what state is Pampa in California.
No, that's in the panhandle of Texas.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah,
right on.
Yeah. Let's just say Oklahoma is a lot nicer than Pampa,
Okay.
Texas. But they got there and they got a job and they stayed there. And then the other set of great grandparents and then my grandparents made it out to Bakersfield, California, which that was a very common spot for. Like I said, they called them Okies at the time when they got out there. And yes, that was a derogatory term that Californians were using against all these Okies that were showing up. Kind of funny how that kind of stuck to this day. But,
yeah. So the term Okie, that was derived from people in California?
Yes.
Really? Yeah. I didn't know that, actually.
Yeah, and it was a derogatory term to, you know, because they showed up and they were just living in their cars, and you see a lot of those pictures from the Great Depression, and a lot of those people were Oklahomans moving out west, and you know, just kind of living hand to mouth and trying to make it happen. And my grandfather heard that they were hiring up in Tracy, that became kind of their hometown and where I grew up. He heard they were hiring on the railroad, so he half hitched and hitched rides and walked and probably jumped a few trains if he could, and got up to Tracy and got a job. And once he had enough money, he sent for his family to come up there, and that's where they stayed.
Wow, that's incredible. So your family has had a farming operation, a little traditional from what you Midwestern farmers might be thinking about. Y'all were growing, as you call it out there, Ammons.
Ammons, that's right.
So I'd never heard that before, but that's almond for most of you normal folks. But out in California, I guess I say almond. And so I was telling David earlier, I can't remember who I said that to. I was like, yeah, they call them Ammons out there. They're like, what? Ammons, almonds. Like, you're messing with me. I'm like, unless David's got me totally fooled, they call them Ammons, and it's wild. I don't understand it. The L is silent. And then you were like, well, how do you pronounce that fish that you eat? Salmon? Okay, I see what you're doing there.
Right. Yep.
But anyways, I think you've got a really cool story about the farming operation and your involvement in that, and obviously growing up around it, but then how you've been able to contribute in your adult life as well. And, you know, you left that, but you still have ties to your dad and what's going on up there. Can you just dive into that so that we can understand what it was like to be around that and then to leave that, but still be able to make contributions in what is really a tough economy or a tough region to be a farmer in?
Yeah, it's really difficult right now. You know, it used to kind of ebb and flow. You know, you have just like anywhere else. You know, you'd have good years and bad years, and hopefully the good years you can get, you know, put enough nuts away to live during the lean years. But it just seems like it's one lean year after another, and it's not market driven. A lot of it is policy driven in California. And yeah, I was sitting with a state senator one time, and she's her family has an agrarian background, an ag background, but she's in the Democrat Party, who is pretty much single rule in California. And she's a great lady, and I was having a conversation with her, and she was kind of bemoaning the fact that, you know, California was basically all almond trees, and it's not really the best thing, right? It'd be better if we could have different things growing. And I explained to her that, you know, it's your policies that are leading to that. You know, the fact that, you know, we have to pay so much for labor, we have all these, you know, regulations and everything, and all the taxes, that almonds were really the only thing left that we could plant to where we could see even a little bit of profit. And unfortunately, that's gone away in the last couple of years too. So really my focus, you know, when I first got done with college. I went to Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, got a degree in ag business. Came home, worked on the farm for a while, and wanted to kind of go do my own thing, which is pretty much impossible to do on a family farm. You're basically an indentured servant.
Yeah. And then if you leave, then it's held against you.
Right.
Like, why are you not here helping?
Yeah, right. Well, I'm definitely the black sheep, and I'm fine with that. So I left, and I actually went into education, first a teacher, and eventually became superintendent of our local school district, where my family went back to the 1860s, been involved with that school, and had a 20-year career doing that and loved it. But I always would kind of help my dad out with some of the bookwork side of things and budgeting, things like that. And so that's kind of what I do now. And I can do obviously most of that remotely now. After COVID, it seems like you can pretty much do any job remotely. But I still go back and forth several times a year to do different things. And my whole goal with the farm now is, my dad's 84 years old. And he's still at it, and I'm basically just trying to shield him from any potential downside. Mm-hmm. So getting things set up to where we can lease this out, work with a partner on this over here, to where I minimize his risk for any downside. That's really been my focus, is just trying to help him out and keep the wolves at bay. Yeah. With that, and keep him rolling.
Man, 84 years old and still going at it, and we live amongst a society right now who they're trying to find ways not to work as young as possible, right. And your dad's he loves it, and he's ate up with it and wants to keep the farm going. And you told me a story. I don't recall exactly what you did, but you got kind of your first taste of entrepreneurship, selling on the farm, or selling things that you guys were growing. I think that's a cool story. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So like I said, when you go to work on the farm, you're an indentured servant. So you live in a home owned by the farm, you drive a vehicle owned by the farm, and your take home pay is very, very minimal. And I wouldn't change anything about my past, but it's just a fact of life. That's the way it is. So I needed to make some extra money. My young family and I always have wanted to do something better. And a part of that is I have a wonderful wife who tries to get me to do better and pushes me, which is great. And I kind of fell into it. We had a cherry orchard, and the packing shed kind of messed with us a little bit and kept telling us that, they're not ready to harvest yet. And I kept looking at them, calling them, hey, guys, these are going to be overripe if you don't get out here and we get these cherries picked. And so they made us wait for a weekend, and they showed up on Monday. We had a crew out there picking, and the representative from the packing shed shows up and says, oh, well, they're all overripe. These are all going to have to go to juice, which means you're going to get pennies on the dollar. So after I let him know how I felt about the game that they had just played,
with some not so choice words,
it's some not so choice words, and he's lucky he made it out of there and wasn't buried in a hole somewhere. I said, okay, here's a bad situation, but maybe there's an opportunity here. So I had a cousin that did a lot of fruit sales with to fruit stands and little grocery stores and other guys like that. And I called him up and I said, hey, I got 20 acres of cherries here. I got to move. So he really helped me get started. I went and got a bunch of boxes from him, and I switched the guys from putting them into bins to putting them in boxes. And then I threw them in the back of my pickup and started driving around to all these different. We had a spot that was a whole bunch of fruit stands. It was known for that in that area, and just walking in and talking to people. And he was the owner or manager here, and introducing myself and trying to hustle my cherries. And a lot of the guys would say, well, what else do you have? And well, we grow apricots and almonds or Ammons. And so one thing led to another, and got to be really good friends with those guys. So that became kind of my second job. At the end of the day of working on the farm, I would have my orders ready to go, and I'd load up my pickup, and sometimes I wouldn't get back till 8:00 at night, but I had some cash in my pocket and felt pretty good about myself. And but the biggest thing with that, it was the relationship building that trust. And I would have some of my buyers call me up and, hey, I heard you sold so-and-so some apricots already. Well, how come you didn't call me? I'd say, because you want good ones, and those aren't good. But that guy doesn't care what they look like. He just needs fruit. So I knew what customers wanted, what they were looking for. And I really think that helped prepare me for what I'm doing now, for sure.
Yeah. I just think that's awesome, because so many times we feel like we're dealt a set of circumstances and we just have to accept that it is the way it is. And instead of you doing that, you took matters into your own hands, got creative, and then did something that worked and was more profitable for the farm. And I'm sure that if not then, now, your dad really appreciates that and probably appreciated it then. And it's just, when you can help out family and when you can do something different to find a different solution on how to succeed in life, it's just, too many people just settle, and
Right.
You didn't settle. And still to this day, you're not a settler, and you're a settler of Oklahoma, but you don't settle. So, man, you've been hustling, and I want to get to that, but I want to back up, and I want you to talk about when you were trying to decide on leaving California, or maybe that wasn't much of a decision. The decision was just, where do we land? I think you were pretty set on leaving California at some point. What was that like for you as, the man of your family, and, discussing that with your wife and figuring out what the next steps would be? What was that like?
Yeah. So I've always had it in my head that I wanted to leave California for a long time. A lot of that had to do with, I love to hunt, I love to fish, I love to be outdoors. And while that is available in California, it's not like it is out here. I mean, especially when you can buy a piece of ground out here, and like I was able to do, and I get up in the morning, grab my bow, and go sit in the tree stand for a couple hours. That's not an option in California. Hunting out west in general is way different than hunting out here, just because it's mostly public land and you have to drive, and there's a lot more involved in that.
Is it very commercialized in California? Is there a lot of outfitting and stuff that goes on?
For certain things, but pretty much you can find a place to go hunt on public land. Yeah. It's very accessible when it comes to that. But it's just different, and it's different when you can wake up in the morning, look outside, and have deer in your backyard. I mean, I love that. My kids are like, Dad, we've seen like 1,000 deer. Why are you yelling at us to come look at the deer? and I hope I never get tired of that. I hope I still love seeing that. So for me, it was. I've always wanted to move somewhere like that, where I could have deer outside my window. So that's always been in my head. My wife, on the other hand, she's very close with her family, but her older sister, and brother-in-law, their kids, and now their grandkids, they moved to Dalhart, Texas. No offense to Dalhart, but it looks a lot like Pampa, and they have a dairy there, and so we would go visit them, and loved getting out of California and visiting America, as we called it.
Leaving California to see America.
Yeah, exactly. It's a wonderful country you have here. And so we would go visit them. And then, especially during COVID, that's when you really saw the market difference between California and America, is during COVID. And that was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back for my wife, was all the things that they were coming out during COVID, and the things that they were making us do in schools and teach in schools, and that she didn't want our youngest to be a part of. And so finally she said, okay, let's go. And we were sitting in Dalhart, Texas, when she kind of made the decision, and we were looking at a map, and she goes, okay, here's what I want. I want it to be America. I want there to be trees, and I want it to be, within a decent drive of Dalhart, Texas. And I said, well, that sounds like Oklahoma. And she shook her head. She goes, there's no trees in Oklahoma. And I had already been there once, so I knew there were trees. So we went for a drive, and we drove out, and we kind of drove around north Oklahoma up by Guthrie, and then kind of a little bit out east, and then we stayed the night in Oklahoma City. And she wanted to go see OU, so we drove down through Norman, and we drove out by Lake Thunderbird and drove south on Road 180. It's 180th Road. And we were kind of out there by the Lexington WMA, and it had just started to snow a little bit. It was perfect. Rolling hills. And she goes, right here is where I want to live. And okay, great. Well, let's see what we can find out there. We found the piece of ground that Will had listed, and I noticed that it had stayed on the market for weeks. And this was December of 2020 and January 2021, when things were just right. They were just flying off the shelves. And I saw that it stayed on the market, and I called him. I said, Will, what's going on with this ground? How come no one's bought it yet? What's wrong with it? And he basically explained to me that it was part of a bigger family piece, and they used to access the back of it through the neighboring property, and you couldn't get there from the front. There was no driveway, no road or anything. And I said, well, that sounds like a bulldozer and some tin horns away from having a driveway. And he said, exactly. He said, but I can't get anybody to come look at it. So we flew out and walked it, and thank goodness we walked it in January, not in July, because we wouldn't be sitting here today if my wife would have walked there in July. And we got back to kind of where the meadow was, and said, this is where the house goes. And that's where the house is now. Ended up picking that up, and then it was a timing issue. My oldest was already out of high school. My daughter was getting ready to graduate from high school in 21 or 22, I forget which. And my youngest was coming up to being in 8th grade, and it's like, okay, we either go for high school, get them out now, or we wait 4 years. And so we were still kind of up in the air how we were going to do that. And then things just really started progressing in the wrong way in California with COVID. And my wife said, let's go now. And inside I was doing a happy dance, but I was trying to, I didn't want her to see that I was that excited about it for fear that she would change her mind. And then the whole process of, now we got to sell our place. We got to talk about moving, dealing with the kids' emotions, that was difficult. My oldest son, he was born to be an Oklahoman. I mean, you look at him and he looks like he's from Oklahoma. He's got the mullet and the wraparound glasses, and he fits right in. These are his people. He actually moved out here 6 months before we did. And so his name is Thies. It's spelled Thies. So the first Thoming to move to California, his name was Thies. So we named him after him. After the first Thoming to come to America. And now he's become the first Thoming to move to Oklahoma, because we are the only Thomings in Oklahoma.
That's awesome.
So I thought it just, the irony of that was pretty special. But then my daughter was going to go to college. So for her, it was fairly easy because she wasn't going to be at home anyway. My youngest, on the other hand, he didn't like the idea of moving out of state. He had his friends, and I kept explaining to him that, look, you're going to be much better off, and you're going to love it. At some point, you're really going to love it. And I kept telling him, I said, look, blonde hair, blue eyes, surfer haircut, life's going to be good for you, son. Don't worry. Life is going to be good.
Yeah.
Right? Because all these girls, you're going to go to this high school, it's 400 kids, and all these girls have been looking at the same boys since kindergarten, and you're going to show up. Yeah. Right? Believe me, they're all going to know you by the end of that first day. And he told some great stories of girls talking to him on that first day. And now he's got a girlfriend, and he's involved. He plays sports, and he loves it. And we couldn't get him away now from Oklahoma if we tried.
Yeah, that's awesome. So how hard was it, though, you being the man of the house and, dad having to convince son that this is going to be good? I mean, you described that very eloquently and like it was probably easy, but I'm sure that was probably pretty tough.
It was heartbreaking. You're pulling a kid away from his comfort zone, the only home he's ever known. We never moved. We lived in that home, since before he was born. So that's the only place he ever lived. So that was really tough. That was really, really tough. And fortunately, he took it more out on his mother than he did to me. So she really caught the brunt of that more than I did. She deserves a medal for sticking to her guns on that one. And there were times when her and I discussed, are we doing the right thing? Is this the right thing to do? And times where there was a lot of doubt in our minds of whether or not we should be doing it or not. But now looking back, like there's no way that we would ever go back. And it's funny because I have friends and family all the time ask me, oh, you guys ready to move back yet? Get tired of Oklahoma? And I think, guys, you have no idea. And just driving here today, I'm looking around as I'm driving, and I took a little video while I was driving of the road I was driving on, and kind of made a joke about the morning commute traffic that I had to deal with that morning. It's just solid trees, the most beautiful place ever, and people. I know it's new because we haven't been here for quite 2 years, but every day's a great day in Oklahoma, and I love it. And I think a lot of people take that for granted, probably, because especially ones that have been born and raised here, because they haven't seen what it's like in other places.
Yeah.
And the feeling is so different. My wife and I went up to Oklahoma City and had to do some shopping for a fundraiser we were putting on, and even the checkout people say thank you and how are you, and everybody's just genuinely nice. Where in California, it's not like that, and very few people are like that. And we would go out of our way. We were always like that. That's the way we were raised. And once we decided to move, and once we had been in Oklahoma a little while, it was always interesting to go to a store, and then you really start noticing. And like when we go back, we're not out of the airplane for 5 minutes, and we're like, when do we get to go back home? Because this isn't it anymore.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. So do you feel like, we're happy to have you here, there's a lot of people who are leaving California and then trying to instill the same problems and issues and things of California into their new communities, and then they're ruining those communities. And I'm not going to say that is every scenario, right? But
right.
In your opinion, two things. Do you ever see California returning to what it once was, whenever that was, where it was a really great state that was great for agriculture and abundant with opportunities, and it was affordable to live there, and so on and so forth? And do you see people from these cities who are going to continue to come in and infiltrate these rural communities and expect us to accommodate their values or lack thereof? And again, this is not directed at everybody, but we see it happening a lot in rural communities, and we see it a lot in Oklahoma. We see a lot of people from Texas coming up to escape Texas, right, because all of the Californians That's that right. are moving to Texas, because right. Oklahoma is what Texas once was, right. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So it's funny you say that, because I asked Will when we were standing there on the property that we ended up buying that first day I met him. I asked him, I said, how are people here towards Californians? Because at the time, a lot of people were moving to Idaho from California because it was far enough away. It was America, but it was close enough to where if you had family in California, you could still get back. And the people in Idaho were not accommodating at all. And what he said was, for the most part, people in Oklahoma are fine. That you're not going to have any issues. And he said, besides, if someone is really on that side that wants to change things, they're probably going to move to Texas, and they're probably going to move to Austin. But there's no Austin in Oklahoma. Mm-hmm. And I haven't seen a lot of that yet. I've had a couple of local people kind of, more in jest than anything else, kind of give me a bad time about being from California and changing things. And I always like to remind them that, the reason I moved here was because it wasn't California, and I'm probably more conservative than they are. And so I think that's the way it always has been. And I think that's the way it always will be. I don't think you're ever going to stop those types of migrations from happening and changes from happening. That's why they called them Okies back in the Depression. Here comes all this riffraff coming from Oklahoma, and the Californians didn't like it, right? And now the Oklahomans are kind of, here comes these, crazy Californians coming in. So you're always going to have that kind of migration. But I think the country in general, you're seeing a lot of people move from different colored states based on their political beliefs, trying to find that place where they feel comfortable, mm-hmm. which is, I think is a great thing, because then we can kind of live in harmony to a certain degree. But I think that's just a natural progression of anywhere.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've seen two cases where people thought they had it figured out in the city, and then they're exposed to the country lifestyle, and they're exposed to the land and what it can do for you, and being able to have a garden, being able to hunt, being able to fish, being able to watch your kids run around. And I think it changes people too. I'm a huge advocate for getting folks out of the city and into the country, and at the very least exposing them to that opportunity and then letting them figure it out from there. And I feel like the majority of people that I've done that with, they're like, okay, I get it now.
Right.
You know,
right.
so
right.
I don't know if you've had that experience yet in this business of getting to work with folks who are like, man, we're just ready to get out of the city.
Yep.
But I've seen it a lot.
Yeah. It's I used to teach a life skills class when I was superintendent of our school district. So I got to teach all the fun stuff because no one could tell me I couldn't teach it. So I would teach kids, financial literacy, health, how to change the oil in a car, all the things that they should be teaching in school, but they don't. And one of the things that I taught a lot about was exactly what you just described, getting out of the city. And it was most of our kids lived in town that came to our school, and really trying to instill a love for the outdoors with these kids. And a lot of the kids had never been, like, California is amazing. I mean, we have, the Sierra Nevada mountains are just spectacular. And you said Oklahoma has mountains. Okay, we'll go with that. They're big hills.
Yeah, they are. You're right. But to some people, they're mountains.
There's some people that are mountains.
Yeah.
If you're from Iowa, it's a mountain.
Yeah.
And so we would always do a trip every year. We'd go up to Yosemite, which is an amazing place. And we had a lot of students who had never been out of the city that would come in and say, "Yeah, we're not going." And our people, we don't go to the mountains. We're going to stay down here. So I'd end up having to call mom or dad or both and convince them that their son or daughter needed to go to Yosemite to see it, and they would always end up agreeing. And so we would go on these hikes, and I would take them way up to these spots that were just spectacular, where you could see up and down one side of the valley, and just the most amazing view in the world. And I had one young man who lived in the middle of a city in Stockton, California, which is not a nice place. And, gang infested, drug dealers on the corners. And he gets to the top and he walks over and he's standing next to me and he's looking over this incredible view, and he turns to me and he uses the same words you just said. "I get it. I get it now, Mr. Thoming. I get what you were trying to say." And that was cool.
Oh,
that was so, it was so neat to open their eyes. And I think, and I used to always cite these studies in that class where they do studies that people who are exposed to the outdoors on a regular basis are in general happier than those that aren't. And regardless of how you think humans were created, it's irrelevant in this scenario. We have spent the majority of our lives as the human race outdoors, not in cities. I used to take the whiteboard in the class, and I would draw a line from one end to the other, and I'd put one little dot on one end, and I would say that line represents the time that humans have been in existence on Earth. And that dot over there represents the amount of time that we've lived in quote unquote civilization. So for all this other time, our bodies and our instincts have been built to be outside. And now we're trying to force ourselves to live in the cities. Mm-hmm. And so what you're talking about, where people move out from the city, that they're awakening that inner self of that desire to be outside.
Yeah.
And that's why we have windows in our homes where we can see the trees outside, and why we have parks and things like that. And I think kids anymore, they don't get exposed to that. They're stuck inside. Everything's virtual. They're playing the computer. Now I sound like the old guy. But you got to get outside.
Yeah. Do you see it making a circle here? Like, do you feel like we're in a temporary era of what you just described, which is all this technology and being inside and being in clubs and doing this? And I know that there's always going to be people who seek that, but I feel like people are waking up a little bit, and they're figuring it out. They're figuring out there's more to life than staring at your phone and living inside of four walls, so to speak. They're getting out, they're adventuring, they're exposing themselves to new opportunities. I mean, traveling is a big thing, and you don't travel necessarily from Chicago to LA. Like, yeah, some people do, but when these people get out and travel, they're going to Glacier National Park and Yosemite and Yellowstone, and they're seeking the outdoors naturally. It's inherent in them, whether they realize it or not.
Yeah, because you kind of have a stereotype built in your mind of, okay, who wants to live out in the country? Oh, it's Joe Redneck, right, in his pickup truck, and wants to go shoot everything. But where I've seen
Which I love those guys.
Yes, absolutely.
My favorite kind of people in the world.
Right, and that's me. So, but where I'm really seeing a lot more people come out of the country are kind of that homestead group, right? And I'm a part of some of those groups on Facebook, and they're having I forget the name of the group, but coming in September near McAllister, they're doing their first annual rendezvous. They're going to start doing that more often, and I'm going to be a sponsor for that. Looking forward to that group. And so I'm on these Facebook groups all the time with these folks, and they're looking to buy 1 acre, 5 acres, and to them that's enormous, right? And it's a different type of person. I mean, these are computer programmers, these are teachers, these aren't your traditional guys in the pickup trucks that want to live out in the country, and that's a wonderful thing to see those kind of folks come out and embrace that lifestyle, and wanting to live sustainably and all of those things, and have their chickens and have their gardens, and it's that they're a great group of people.
Yeah, I'm gonna ask kind of a wild question here. Do you feel like with the direction our society is going, that there will come a day where there's going to be a whole lot of people out there that are very happy they had the land to live on and to lean on, and there's going to be a whole lot of people who are wishing that they would have invested into land?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, that's already happening, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's you see land prices just keep ticking up, getting more and more expensive, and you'll hear people say, things like, man, I wish I would have bought that 20 years ago. And, and I always tell them, the best time to buy land is, no, now. Buy it now while you can.
Or yesterday. Or
right.
The day before.
Yeah. If or tomorrow, you just buy it. But yeah, you see a lot of people that I think are going to be kicking themselves for not making that move. As we saw it during the pandemic. You went to the grocery store and half the shelves were empty. I mean, I don't know what it was like in Oklahoma, but I saw it in California, and it was scary. And there was really no reason for it, and there was absolutely no other than panic buying.
Yeah.
And if you can, and I always took this very seriously as a dad, that my job was to make sure that I protected my family, and I still take that very seriously. And that means, making sure we have enough food on hand and the ability to get food if I needed to. And that was one of the big things about moving to Oklahoma as well was, I needed to be around more like-minded people that thought the same way, right? And here you can have a great garden. You can go out, harvest food. I mean, you've got, deer running around and things like that. But it's scary kind of when we look down the road of what it could be like at some point.
What do you think it could be like?
I don't know. It's scary.
Come on.
And it's
Let's be vulnerable for a second.
Right.
In your opinion, this is just one guy's opinion.
All right.
What do you see? I mean, what does the future look like?
Well, we keep printing dollars like we've got them, right? And we're all paying for the inflation, right? We're paying for sending all this money overseas. We're paying for it every time we go buy a Big Mac, every time we fill up our tank. We're paying for it. And at some point, we're going to devalue our dollar to the point to where we're going to have a financial collapse. And when that happens, people's EBT cards aren't going to work when they go to the grocery store. Even if you can get to the grocery store, you're not going to be able to buy anything because either it's not going to be there or it's going to be too expensive. And the people are going to look around and say, where's the food? And they're going to look out to us and hope, that we're going to be able to provide that food, and we're going to be, living in difficult times at that point. It's a scary future. And, like I said, it's one of the reasons why I wanted to get my family to Oklahoma, where I know people in Oklahoma would band together and help each other out. I mean, you see it all the time. You see it after the tornado in Sulphur, they were turning people away that wanted to help. And Oklahoma has a different standard when it comes to that. And I wanted to be somewhere like that, where people help each other. They're not looking to steal from them or take from them. They're trying to help each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, man. I don't understand why, but people seem to just turn away from that reality that we're in right now. I don't know if they feel like they'll never be affected by it, or like, hey, the government's got our backs, or they're just not worried, or maybe they're just genuinely enjoying the life they're living and they're not paying attention to the things around them. But man, that type of atmosphere that you just described, it's sneaking up on us in a hurry, you know. And there's conflict in the world. There always has been, but for whatever reason, we as a country seem to continue to insert ourselves into that. And like you said, they're taking our dollars and they're sending them everywhere but here. And we get taxed to no end. I mean, everywhere you turn, you're just you're paying taxes. It doesn't matter what it is, whether you die, you buy something, you get a paycheck. I mean, we could go on and on and on, but it doesn't have to be that way. And I think if more people would wake up and take that responsibility seriously, together we could all create a much better life here in the United States if we just put our foot down some of these times and said, nah, no mas, you know?
And we have so many things that we need to fix here, you know, with the homeless issue, you know, which is mostly drug abuse and you know, psychological issues and mental health. And we don't seem to be trying to fix that at all. You know, they're throwing billions of dollars at it, but they're not fixing the core issue when it comes to that. And there's a lot of poverty here in Oklahoma. I've seen it. I'm a volunteer firefighter, and we've gone into some places and into some homes where it's heartbreaking, and it's right here. It's happening every single day. And we're not, as a country, we don't value that for some reason. We don't value helping our own people. You know, we want to save some other country, some other place that really, and you can argue whether or not it'll affect us in the long run, but we need to clean our own house first. We have a lot of issues here that we can deal with first.
Yeah, I agree, man. It's hard because it's hard for me personally. I don't know how you feel, but you think that you have control, and there are things that you can control, but at the end of the day, you just have to kind of turn it over to God, in my opinion, or at least that's what I do. You can only do so much before you're just like completely overwhelmed by the circumstances of the world we're living in and the chaos. And, you know, right now you have all the Israel versus Palestine stuff going on and these riots and protests on campuses. And for those of you, I won't get too political here, but you shouldn't be surprised. It's an election year. So there's going to be chaos happening here in the United States. But man, I just leave myself scratching my head sometimes. Like, you just got to trust in God, man, because there's probably not a single thing you could do by yourself, or even if you banded together with a group of people, that could change the trajectory of the way things are going. But I do think it starts with getting back to our rural roots, getting back to having faith in God, and living a good, healthy, clean life that is where you're fed, not just literally, but spiritually and physically. And I think the tied to the land lifestyle, so to speak, it provides that for you. Absolutely.
One of the greatest gifts about when we've moved to Oklahoma, we went to this little Catholic church. We're Catholic, and it was Christmas Eve, and we were going to a different church in a bigger town, and we wanted to go to a Christmas Eve mass. And we pull up to this church, and there's an older lady in a car parked outside, and we asked her if there was mass tonight, and because we weren't sure that we were in the right place. And she said, oh my gosh, oh my God, yeah, absolutely. Are you guys new? And we said, yeah, we just kind of moved in. And she goes, and she counts how many people we have in the car. She goes, now we've got 20. So it's been such a blessing for us to be part of St. Mary's Catholic Church in the big town of Wanette, Oklahoma. But what a wonderful community, and people that are just amazing people. You know, there's a lady that we've kind of befriended. Her name is Charlene Fundus, and her family's been here since before the land run, been on a cattle ranch. And she still gets out there. She's in her 80s, and she still tells her cowboys which ones she wants sent to the sale, and she's a feisty older lady and wonderful, and she's really made us feel welcome in the community, and I think that's kind of what you're talking about, where you have to have that, your faith as well. All of that has to be a part. That's part of the whole thing, and I'll be honest, my faith was really shaken when I was in California. The churches there, they're so big, and it's about politics and all the things that were going wrong. And out here, it's about what it should be. You're focusing on the right things. You're focusing on community. You're focusing on your faith, not all of the other stuff. So that, for me personally, and I know my family would say the same, that's been a tremendous blessing for us to find that church and become part of it.
Yeah, it's awesome. So with all that being said, David, you're rooted here in Oklahoma now. You're happy as can be. I've never seen somebody so happy to live in a new place. But then again, I'm not too close to many other people that lived in California previously. So I'm happy for you, and I'm happy for your family. And I'm happy that you made the decision to join our team at Arrowhead Land Company. So tell us what that's been like for you, transitioning out of education and then starting brand new in a brand new career, brand new industry. I know you've got some real estate experience, buying and selling things personally, but what's it been like for you launching a business in a new state, in a new area, and just being exposed to all of it all at once?
It's been great. I love every minute of it. I don't feel like I'm working. I get up every morning, and the first thing I'm doing is I'm online. I'm looking for properties that popped overnight. And as my wife will attest, before I'm putting my phone down, before I turn the light off, I'm either answering a text or looking at some properties and working all day. But it doesn't feel like work. It's such an amazing job to have. And it was nothing that was ever on my radar. Never thought about becoming a real estate agent at all. It was actually Will that suggested it, and it all worked out great. And you told me something along the way where you said, "Look, doing this job, it's simple, but it's not easy. The recipe is pretty easy to follow, and you kind of laid that out. Here are the things that you need to do, right? And every single one of those things that you said that I needed to do, I've done, and they've resulted in business. But a lot of those aren't easy. For some people, it's difficult to pick up that phone and make that cold call. Just calling people up, introducing yourselves, and having them, say no. But that's the other benefit of doing this in Oklahoma. At least they don't hang up on you. At least they talk to you for half an hour, and they want to know your whole story.
Yeah,
and
some of them will.
Yeah, some of them will. No, I've had a few. I've had a few of those for sure. One guy even blocked my number, but
that's because you said Ammons.
Right. Probably. But it's been great, and it's all of it was kind of my natural default anyway. I've always been somewhat of a salesperson. When I worked at the school district, I took over. It was a school district. It was really struggling. We only had about 200 and something students. We were really struggling financially. When I left, we had over 2,200 students when I left.
Wow.
I was building it with charter schools and bringing families in. And I had to sell our program, but I also, more importantly, had to have a great program to sell. And that's what's made it great for me working for Arrowhead is Arrowhead does such a great job with everything that they do, with the branding, with the marketing, with the back office support. And it has such a great reputation that it makes my job a lot easier when I'm not only selling my expertise, but I'm also selling, Arrowhead. And though it has to be both of those. You can be the best salesman in the world, but if you're not selling a good product, it's meaningless. And those two things combined have made it a wonderful experience. I've met some great people. I've got an NFL football player as a client. Go Chargers. It's my new team now. It used to be the Cowboys.
Yeah.
Now I'm vested in the Chargers. But it's been great. I love every day. I have a client of mine who's an investor, and he called me one day and he asked me how I was doing. I said, "Man, I'm doing awesome." And he goes, dude, have you ever had a bad day since you moved to Oklahoma? And I said, no, I can't think of one.
Dude, that positivity is so contagious, and I love that about you. I try to be a positive person. Everybody has bad days, right? But that energy and that positivity, people feed off of that, and they feel it, and it changes the trajectory of their day when they come across somebody like you who's just genuinely happy and genuinely excited and has this zest for life. And I love that about you, and I'm going to continue to brag on you, but I'm going to speak to this at a broader level. You talking earlier about doing the things that you're supposed to do that aren't always easy, but they are easy, right? I mean, I've probably worked with hundreds of agents in this business at this point in my career, and rolling up your sleeves and doing the thing as opposed to waiting for it to happen is always the difference between a great agent and a mediocre one. Somebody who makes it in this business and somebody who doesn't. And you're brand new. I mean, we just got done finishing our meeting, and I was talking about things you could do, and I was talking about calling for sale by owners and this and that, and we had broke for a little bit. And I went upstairs to my office, and by the time I came back down, you had made a phone call to somebody, and you're like, I've got a listing appointment already. I was like, how did you do that? And that's when I knew. I was like, this guy's going to be a beast, because if he took upon himself to do that in the 10 minutes that we just took a little break, like, you were going to do the rest of the things that were even harder, right? And for those of you listening out there who your real estate business might not be where it wants to be, maybe you're new to the business, you're thinking about, what can I do to possibly get things going? It's just doing the little things day in and day out consistently, and staying in front of people and getting involved in your communities, and just all the things that make you a little bit uncomfortable, just taking action and doing it, right? And you've done that, and I'm really proud of what you've accomplished in not even 3 full months in the business. You're doing great things. And if you have any advice to give to any new agents, or any agent for that matter, what would it be?
Don't give up and keep trying. Like that listing appointment you talked about for sale by owner down the road from my place, and I had already taken a picture of the guy's phone number. And then once you guys hired me, and I think you actually had to run home. He had a contractor coming to your house. So I was sitting out front. So I called the guy, and I met him out there the next day, and he was not interested in listing it whatsoever. I used to be an agent, and I'm going to sell it myself. But I would call him about every 7 to 10 days. And on the 5th call, I convinced him that he needed to list it. And the way I got him to do that was actually advice from Will. He gave me some great advice on that one. He said, look, he's trying to sell it for what the market is. The guy was not out of line on his number, but he's not going to sell it to his neighbors for that. And that's how he's marketing it. And so I called him up, and I told him that. I said, look, yes, you should get that $4,000 an acre. There's no doubt about it. But you're not going to sell that to your neighbors. We got to get this out there. So we actually ended up listing it a little bit higher, and it's under contract today. But it took, I think I counted, it was 12 times that I communicated with him from the very first one, for calls and texts. And it was no, maybe, yes. And it's don't give up. Yeah. Keep at it. Make them block your number. That
may or may not be sound advice. I don't know.
Leave that part out.
Probably depends on who you are.
Right. But he, but a lot of, my listings, it was at first it was no, and you keep talking to him, and keep at it. And get out in your community, be visible. Go to coffee at the local coffee shop, or in my case, it's the gas station. Some wonderful people that I have coffee with every morning, and it's led to business. But that's the biggest thing is you, just because they say no today doesn't mean it's going to be no next time. And just keep at it. Keep letting them know that you're there to help them at some point.
Yeah. And I think, going back to what we were saying, it takes a positive attitude, and it takes faith to weather those no's until you can
Right.
get to that yes,
Right.
you know, and
Yep.
I think you've done a great job so far, man. I've really enjoyed talking to you. I've enjoyed getting to know you over the last several months, and I love your story. It's just so cool as I think about how many other people can maybe resonate with something like that, or how many other people are staring at this big life change, just wondering, do I go, do I not, do I stay in my comfort zone, do I jump outside of it? And you've jumped, man. I mean, you left California and came to America, as you like to say. You're here in Oklahoma doing the thing. You've launched a new real estate business, and you're out there moving and shaking, making it happen. And I feel honored to know you, man.
Thank you, Andrew. It's been great.
Well, this is the Tied to the Land podcast. My name's Andrew Schultz. This is David Thoming. Thanks for listening, guys.